What's going on, guys? Doomwake here, and welcome back to another episode of Watching the Meta, the weekly series where we take a look at the Magic Online challenges, sometimes some paper tournaments, if those are available to us, and we take a look at what people played over the weekend. And also, towards the end, we look at the metagame, see what did well, see what won, but we try to take a look at a couple of spicy deck lists. So if you're new to this series, you're not going to want to miss the spice that we have today. Just wanted to say happy holidays for those who celebrate. It is a wonderful time of the year. Again, I thank you for all of your support over the past year or so. It's been quite a year, quite an up and down year for the channel. I thank you guys for sticking around the entire time. We're trying out some new things down the pipeline for 2025, so be sure to look forward to that. I'm excited for it. We are going to start today. We usually start with Modern, but I will say this video is going to be a little bit different than our usual structure, whereas there's very little Standard, very little Pioneer, and quite a bit of Modern. Just the entire format gets shaken up. That's the way we have to do it. So we're going to start with Standard. And not a lot different. I mean, there's a bit of an uptick in Dimir from 21 to 27. Gruul Prowess, slight bit of a downtick, but that kind of, the Gruul Prowess players, they appear to have maybe just switched to Mono Red, because Mono Red took a huge jump from 2.3 to 9.4. Golgari Midrange, Boros Prowess, Overlords, Convoke, roughly about the same. Bit of an uptick in Azorius Convoke, slight uptick in Sultai Terror, but at the end of the day, it's really just a two-horse race between Dimir Midrange, well, you could include Golgari in that. If you include Black Midrange combined, it's about 37, and the red decks, whether it's Gruul, Poros, or Mono Red. That's really what Standard is right now. You can hate it, you could love it, it is what it is. But there are some interesting decks, and I have 3 that I wanted to share for you. So before we get into the deck list real quick, the 4 challenges that I have data covered for, they were won by Golgari Midrange and 3 Dimir Midrange. So we are going to take a look at some deck lists. And the first that I have here is from Hamuda, a name, if you play a lot of Magic Online, you may recognize. They do quite well for themselves. They top 8 a lot of challenges. And Hamuda has taken this blue-white glyph deck, and we've removed the glyphs. We've kind of made this more into just a blue-white mid-range deck. It's labeled as Convoke on Goldfish. I wouldn't necessarily call it Convoke. I don't see any Knight Errant Evioses, but they've sort of cut out the more, like, what's the word that I'm looking for? The cards that are the more synergistic, and just kind of replace them with good cards, right? 4 Enduring Curiosity, 4 Flood Pits Drowner, keeping the same core of Siren, Novice, Warden, only down to 2 Sirens, but I kind of like this approach, and I want to spend a little bit more time working on these blue-white decks for Atlanta, which is the Spotlight Series coming up at the beginning of January. And this is, I think, one of my front runners at this point. I was initially high on the Glyph deck, but it seems like a lot of people have moved away from Glyph, and perhaps for good reason. Next up here from Rolo 1993 in 6th place, we have Jund Beans. So I think it was either last week or the week before, we took a look at Abzan Beans, which was a slightly different take on kind of the Up the Beanstalk Sunfall ramp deck. This one, no Sunfalls to be seen. We do have 4 Deadly Cover-Ups, so that's kind of our Sunfall replacement, but just the good Overlords, the green and the red one, not really a lot of reason to play the black one in this deck because you can't find other Overlords. Beanstalks, and then a bunch of kill spells. Go for the Throats, Deadly Cover-Ups, Herd Migration for mana fixing. The one interesting thing about this deck list is Herd Migration without Overlord only ever going to get you 3 because you have a forest, a mountain, and a swamp. But kind of an interesting take on the Up the Beanstalk shell, and I'm curious to see if this one sticks around, similar to the 5-color Beans decks. And the last deck I wanted to take a look at, this one is actually pretty sweet, and I played a little bit with this on my Twitch stream the last time that I played Standard, which was about, I think, 4 or 5 days ago at this point. And there might be a video on this deck coming in the near future, because I had an absolute blast playing this. It's Nurturing Pixie, which is a card that allows you to bounce your own permanents, combined with Hopeless Nightmare, Nowhere to Run, Sheltered by Ghosts, well, I guess you don't want to bounce that one, and Storm Chaser's Talent. So a lot of people have played this kind of black-white Pixie deck in the past with, like, Hopeless Nightmare, Tithing Blade, other ETB things, going all the way up the curve to Roddenmouth Viper. But this one is splashing blue, a little bit lower to the ground, and utilizing Storm Chaser's Talent combined with both Fear of Isolation and Nurturing Pixie to kind of give you more copies of Pixie, which I think I like quite a bit. I was very impressed when I played this deck, and might be something that's worth considering. But with all of that said, let us go ahead and jump over to Pioneer. Again, not a ton to look at, right? Rakdos Demons, 23%, roughly about the same. Azorius Humans took a bit of a downswing. Rakdos Prowess up a couple of percent. Jund's Sacrifice is down significantly, right? From 5.6 to 0.6. So that one kind of fell off a little bit. Phoenix, roughly about the same. Nothing too crazy. A little bit more Niv, a little bit more 5-color Enigmatic, a little bit more Zur Overlord. It's actually the pretty significant upgrade for Zur, 0.6 to 6.9. But yeah, other than that, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say the Pioneer is a 2-deck race, similar to Standard, where it's like mid-range versus red. This is just mid-range versus everything else, question mark. Unholy Annex, really good card. But the challenges, let me take a look at my spreadsheet here. The challenges were won by Blue-White Humans, Dimir Ninjas, Jund's Sacrifice, Mono-Red Aggro, and Red-Black Demons. Now, we do have a couple of interesting Pioneer deck lists to take a look at, and we are going to start with Herden 72. This is Blue-White Metalwork Colossus. Now, the funny thing about this, for those of you who don't know, Pioneer Masters recently introduced onto Magic Arena. For some reason, Sanctum of Ugin not in the set, and also not already on the client, so can't play this one. I was all excited to play this deck when Pioneer Masters came out on Arena, because I just kind of assumed that Sanctum was in the set, but it wasn't. Alas, we cannot play that deck on Arena. Still pretty fun, though. Metalwork Colossus, triggering Synthesizer. Leyline Axe is kind of the new find for this deck, which Leyline Axe on the Metalwork Colossus, pretty good. Just a lot of cool stuff going on. Smith to find the Colossus, Brass Knuckles to get 2 copies of the Brass Knuckles, which retains the mana value, so you can cast Colossus pretty easily. The Sanctums are pretty important, though. I would recommend not playing this deck on Arena right now, until we'll eventually get the Sanctums, right? And the next deck I want to take a look at, or the last deck, we only have 2 for you here today, from Shadows 2005, in 18th place. This is Ninjas, which we've seen over the past couple of weeks, but a slightly different take on Ninjas. Unholy Annex, no actual demons in this deck, right? Mockingbird, Prodigy. But what's funny is I think the concept is that you have Mockingbird, and if you play against other demons decks and they unlock the Ritual Chamber on Unholy Annex, you can just Mockingbird their 6/6 for 1 mana. So you effectively have a 1 mana demon, and with how much Rakdos Demons is in the format, you might think that's probably more common than you would think it is, which I think is kind of funny. And then you can also like pick up the Mockingbird, copy something later down the road. They're also trying out Ingenious Prodigy, which is a 1-mana creature, but not really a 1-mana creature. You can cast it on turn 1 if you need to enable a Kaido draw, but you can also cast it later in the game to draw some extra cards. So that is kind of cool. So it's more ways to enable your Kaidos and more ways to enable your Moon Circuit hackers. Interesting take on demons. Unholy Annex, really good card. If you're playing Pioneer, it's a good chance you should probably have that card in your deck, perhaps alongside Fable the Mirrorbreaker as well. But that is going to do it for Pioneer and Modern. Let's sweep those out of the way because we got a lot of stuff to talk about. Or I said Pioneer and Standard. Anyways, Modern. Now, let's do it. And boy, what a difference a week makes. Looking at this, just looking at the graphs from last week is kind of alarming when you think about it. Like 33% Boros energy last week, not even a single deck eclipsing past 13. I guess if you want to get technical and combine Mardu and Boros, which maybe you do, look at energy combined is still almost about 20%. The rumors of energy's demise are greatly over-exaggerated. But this metagame just looks so sweet. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on here. That's the thing about the metagame for Modern is we're not really going to have any sort of like true metagame for at least, my guess would probably be about a month. It's probably going to take people at least a month to kind of settle in and figure out what they want to be playing. But yeah, Zenith, Opal, Looting, even Splinter Twin, which we'll showcase in today's deck lists, had a pretty good weekend. So if I listed off every single deck on this graph, we'd be here for a while. Just, you can kind of see what's going on here. It seems to be that maybe the people who are playing Mardu and Boros, the decks are still just really good. The Energy Core of Gadasouls, Ocelot Pride, Ajani, really good cards. If you go and take a look at one of the energy decks, which we won't be doing today, but they really don't look that much different. They're basically the same decks. They just cut the Ring and Raptor. Looks like some people are including Fable the Mirrorbreaker over Ring. Some people are including Unstable Amulet over Raptor. Some are just playing more kill spells. You don't really need to do a ton of fancy work to get these cards out of your energy decks. But yeah, this is what the metagame looks like. I will tell you that I have 8 challenges recorded. They were won by 8 different decks. Boros Energy, Brood Scale Combo, Golgari Cauldron, Grixis Frog, Jund Creativity, Mardu Energy, Samwise Combo, and Teamer Eldrazi. So now that we have all of this that we gotta look at, we gotta spend some time taking a look at decks because I have quite a few for you today. And what better way to start us off than with the meme card itself, Splinter Twin. Their words, not mine. This is from Richie727, who top aided, I believe this was the first challenge on Friday, with, I guess you could call it an old favorite. This is Tarmo Twin. For people who don't know, when Splinter Twin was legal back in the day, the idea or the concept was play Splinter Twin and play some sort of alternate threat to back up your Splinter Twins, kind of your mid-range threat. It's almost like Jund with a combo. And everybody back in the day, at least when I say back in the day, I mean 5-6 years ago, a lot of people gravitated towards Tarmogoyf as kind of your mid-range threat. And it makes sense. It's kind of hard to kill if people are playing damage-based removal spells. Works nicely just with your spells, like you counter a spell that's usually 2 types in the graveyard. Yeah, this is Teamer Twin, Tarbo Twin, rather. Patrick Dickman would be proud. I don't have anything else to say. Counter spells, removal spells, combo, Tarmogoyf, you kind of got everything covered. Deck looks sweet. Moving on, we have Wolf Job in 12th place. This is Hollowvine. Now, one of the main decks that people were discussing with the unbanning of Faithless Looting was Hollow One, and there has been quite a bit of Rakdos Hollow One. The lists are very similar to what they were prior to the unbans, with Hollow Ones, Nethergoyfs, Orcish Bowmasters, discard spells sometimes, things like that. And then you have your lootings and your burning inquiries. This one is going a little bit further, and it still has the same core of Hollow One, Street Wraith, Inquiry, Faithless Looting, but it's going all the way up to Vengevine, where you have Vengevine go into the graveyard, and then you maybe cast a free Hollow One, maybe you hit a Root Walla, and both of those are quote-unquote free creatures that can let you get back the Vengevine. What I like about this is previously with Vengevine, you only had like really Burning Inquiry and Fear of Missing Out to discard it, but now you actually have a much more consistent way of getting Vengevine into the graveyard in the hands that you have it. So this makes a lot of sense. Not sure exactly if this is the best way to build Hollow One, but it is certainly the most explosive with potentially access to very, very, very fast Vengevines. And we got to give all of the unbanned cards some love at some point. Now, I was having a slightly difficult time finding a Zenith deck that I wanted to talk about because a lot of it is Amulet Titan. And Amulet Titan, I know nothing about Amulet Titan. That is completely outside of my pay grade. But what I did find was this interesting one from Aussie51 in 27th place. Now, for those of you who don't remember, there was a combo deck that involved Venerated Rot Priest and, where's the sorcery if I can find it, Ground Rift. So you basically cast a couple of spells. Ground Rift is a creature that just says target creature can't block this turn, and it has Storm. But what's important about Ground Rift is all of the copies also trigger Venerated Rot Priest. So if you have 2 Rot Priests and you Ground Rift for 5, all of those Rot Priests are going to trigger twice, and that's 10 poison. So people had played this deck before, but it turns out Green Sun Zenith giving you more consistency on Rot Priest, maybe this is something to take a look at again. You have some free spells, like I'd love the Gather Courage in this deck because it protects your Rot Priest from stuff like Lightning Bolt, and then your free spells like Gut Shot, Mutagenic Growth, Summoners Pact is a free spell that finds Zenith, or not Zenith, Pact's a free spell that finds Rot Priest, and then Mutagenic Growth and Gut Shot, just stuff you can cast to up the storm count. So really cool take. This is maybe one of the better ways to play Green Sun Zenith? ? Let me know in the comments. Next up from Jack9EM in 17th place. This is Affinity. Now, we had posted a video on the channel with Affinity a few days prior. I think it might have been on Thursday of last week. I'm recording this on Tuesday, Christmas Eve. And this looks pretty similar to what we played. Emrys, Kappas, Memnites, Ornithopters, Stop. I think this might actually be the exact same list. No, because I didn't have Force Negation main deck. Very close, though. I had the 2 Platings, 4 Mox Opal, 4 Springleaf Drum, the Emry plus Mishra's Bauble, Kappa, Cannoneer, Memnite, Ornithopter, Thought Monitor. So this is, I guess you could call this 8-cast, right? 4 Thoughtcast, 4 Thought Monitor. Very similar to the legacy versions of 8-cast. I know those versions played Chalice of the Void in the main deck. We don't have Ancient Tomb or Cydia Traders, so kind of makes sense to not play Chalice. Although, with Mox Opal, you still maybe could play main deck Chalice. I'm not sure there seems to be a lot of differentiating opinions on what the best version of Affinity is. I've seen Mono Blue, I've seen Blue White, I've seen Rakdos, I've seen Grixis, I've seen Four Color. We're kind of all over the place with Affinity. But I do know that it has 4 Mox Opal, and this card is still as crazy as it was back in 2020. So shout out to Jack for this particular list. Next up by Medevdev, this is another Faithless Looting deck. We talked about going a little bit bigger with Vengevine. Well, what if we went all the way up the top to Archon of Cruelty? So this is actually combining Persist and Hollow One, which is something that I hadn't seen anybody else do, and I thought this space is kind of interesting. So you have Burning Inquiry, Faithless Looting, and Goblin Lore as your discard spells to enable stuff like Hollow One. Flameblade Adept is another cheap creature. No Vengevines here, but pairs very, very well with all of those discard enablers. And then Detective's Phoenix is... What's interesting about this for me is you can actually Detective's Phoenix to give your Archon of Cruelty haste, which only costs 3 mana, right? 2 mana for the Persist, and then 1 mana to the Phoenix the Archon. I'm curious to see if this individual had done that in the challenge, because that would be kind of hilarious. But yeah, Detective's Phoenix is just another powerful card when combined with stuff like Hollow One and Street Wraith, because a lot of times those go to the graveyard. At least my Hollow Ones go to the graveyard when I cast Burning Inquiry. So, interesting take on the Faithless Looting archetype, just incorporating going a little bit bigger with Archon of Cruelty, and I kind of like it. And speaking of nobody knows where the consensus on Affinity is, from HDG underscore Borise in 24th place, we have Azorius Affinity. So, this one's actually more of like, I want to say hybrid. No, I was going to say hybrid Hammer Time Affinity just because I saw the Esper Sentinels, but not really. So it's playing a lot of white cards. 4 Esper Sentinel, 4 Ingenious Smith, and 4 Portable Hull. It's pairing those with the blue Artifact Shell. It's trimming down on the Emery package, but it's also going a little bit higher up the curve too with Urza Lord High Artificer. So this almost looks like Wurza without the Wurs, which would just be Z. Anyway, okay, look, I'm terrible at making jokes, all right? Don't make fun of me. Laugh at me in the comments. Aether, Spellbomb, Lava Spur Boots, Needle, Relic, Shadow Spear, so typical Urza Saga package deal. But yeah, it's actually going a little bit bigger up the curve too with Urza, which is something that I haven't seen a lot of people do, but it kind of makes sense when you have Mox Opal to play kind of the more expensive cards that you weren't able to play before because you didn't have enough acceleration. So maybe an interesting take on it. Not exactly sure if I would necessarily play the Urzas. Like, it might still be better to play Kappa Cannoneer. But you see what I'm saying with this. There is so much space within this Mox Opal artifact shell that it's really hard to find the right list. Who's that guy? Nah, I'm just kidding. I played a challenge. What was this? This was on Saturday night, I think. This was after I streamed. I streamed for like 7 hours on Saturday, and I just kind of wanted to play the challenge off stream. This was where I wanted to take the blue-black Oculus Faithless Looting deck. So people were playing Oculus with Faithless Looting, and I was thinking to myself, well, what if we just took Oculus Faithless Looting and we included Archon of Cruelty plus Persist, similar to what the Hollow One deck with Persist was doing. And it worked out pretty well. Ended up going, I believe I went 4-2, and I dropped before I played the last round because it was like 2 a.m. and I didn't want to play a match for 10 chests. So I went to bed. But yeah, it was decent. I liked a lot of what it was doing. There's like, the one value deep analysis to pair with your discard outlets, which is kind of cool. Kiora as an additional unearthed target to, because you have unearthed plus Psychic Frog. See, the cool thing about this is persisting in Abhorrent Oculus, still pretty good. And I did that a couple of times. It's still a 4/4, so it doesn't die to bolt, and it provides a lot of pressure. So this idea was pretty cool, and maybe something that I want to spend a little bit more time on. And last but not least, we can't end the video without giving a shout out to Arclight Phoenix. This is a user and _1 in 4th place, top 8 at top 4 at the challenge. So I've seen a lot of mono red Phoenix decks, similar to what they look like before, with like prowess creatures, bunch of lava spikes, bunch of burn spells, gut shots, things of that nature. This is a little bit, I'm not going to say bigger, but just different. So it's splashing black for really only Netherglaive. This is realistically the only black card in the deck. And I don't hate it because you have a decent type spread, artifact, creature, instant, land, sorcery. You could even maybe, there's Tarfires as well. I was going to say you could play some Tarfires. This user is already playing 2 to kind of get that extra type in there. But Netherglyph as your additional threat, it hits really hard. Now, the problem is the Phoenix angle is a little weak to Graveyard Hate. So getting to play Monastery Swiftspear and Soulscar Mage and have that 8 package of creatures that are good against Graveyard Hate, that is kind of appealing. But this version can't do that as well. So that would be my big concern here. But Phoenix with Netherglyph, you kind of have your typical fare of Lava Dart, Lightning Bolt, Manamorphose, couple of Tarfires, couple of Unholy Heats, the 4 Lootings, 2 Forked Bolt in the main, get out of here Ocelot Pride, and then some various black cards in the sideboard that you also get access to. So, interesting take on the Phoenix deck. Not sure if this is where I would want to be. I may want to spend a little bit more time on Mono Red, but very cool take nonetheless. And folks, that is going to do it for another episode of Watching the Meta. This is barely just scratching the surface on the amount of awesome decks that people played over the past weekend in Modern. I've actually been thinking about doing a separate video, like maybe weekly video series on just Modern deck lists, because at least for the next month or so, we are going to have a lot of material to work with. So again, thank you all for watching. Happy holidays if you celebrate, and until next time, adios.